My friends, good evening, good evening, good evening. It is indeed that time of the week once again. Doesn't time fly when you're, well, I would say having fun, but given the state of our country, I don't think any of us are having fun. It feels like we're pulling teeth, but we've got each other, my friends. We've got each other. Now, I've got a lot to talk about tonight. I mean, my God. And also, Priti Patel has unfollowed me on Twitter. And to be honest, maybe we should, raise a little glass to her because actually, I imagine she's had quite the week, to be honest. Reform wouldn't even have her if she did come over. Awkward. Anyway, moving on to issues and people that actually do matter. Donald J. Trump. Is tonight the night? Well, what everyone's discussing, my friends, the Arabian Sea right now has a massive pulsing USS Abraham Lincoln within its waters. Tonight, the world is holding its breath as the big stick of American diplomacy arrives in the form of 100,000 tons of nuclear-powered steel, right? And President Trump has sent that massive armada towards Iran, the Abraham Lincoln, as I say, and he hasn't minced his words. He posted on his Trump Truth social media platform, make a deal. He said, make a deal or face an attack that will make the one in collaboration with Israel last June, make those strikes look like a firework display in comparison. He's telling the Ayatollah that time is of the essence, right? We aren't talking about Obama-style, weak, lily-livered liberal, oh, please make a deal. We're not talking about strategic patience. We're not talking about the international community getting round the table, giving them billions in a deal so they can build their nuclear arsenal underground. We're talking about speed. We're talking about violence. The president is literally moving a mountain of metal into their backyard while they scramble to find their own drones just to actually see where he is. Everything was taken out. It's the ultimate ultimatum. And the regime, well, I imagine they're shaking in their sandals tonight, my friends. I really, really do. And while the Liberal commentariat in London worries about the escalation that this could bring about, talk about the actual escalation that's taken place on the streets of Tehran and actually around Iran. 6,000. So 6,221 people. That's the number, my friends, not of US troops aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln, but the number of Iranians murdered by this god-awful regime in just 1 month. They've got snipers on roofs shooting kids. They've shut down the internet to hide the bodies. The internet's been off for about, a month now. They're hanging dissidents in their hundreds. So these people on the streets here, they're not protesters that you and I would know. They're not even protesters to their regime. To Iran, not to Iran, to the Islamist Ayatollah, they're enemies of God. Trump has seen the morgues, he's seen the evidence. He knows that the killing hasn't stopped. So if the West won't stand up for these people, then there's a man in the White House who will. And then some people will say, hang on a minute, Darren, hang on. President Trump said he wouldn't get involved in foreign wars. To me, though, if a strategic ship encroaching upon Iranian waters is able to actually take out an Iranian regime that is building a nuclear weapon, for all we know, has one, right? We don't know what Trump actually managed to destroy last June. We know he did damage, But is it destroyed? We don't know. So this isn't just about nukes. It's about ending a 40-year massacre. It's about ending Iran's proxies throughout the Middle East. It's about ending Iran's terrorist cells throughout the Western world. It's about so much than foreign intervention. So the Ayatollahs are actually claiming that they're ready for all-out war, right? With what? With what air defenses? The Israelis, excuse me, the Israelis turned their Russian systems, their aging Soviet sort of, they're ready for a museum. That's how old they were. Well, they turned them into scrap metal. They're threatening Israel and the US, but now they're looking at the Caracas playbook. I'm not saying crackers, my friends, Caracas in Venezuela. Trump, in these scenes here, reminded the Iranians today he's done this before. He warned Maduro. Maduro is that man on screen there, Maduro of Venezuela, who took over after Chavez, promised socialism, a socialist utopia, turned it into a complete communist hellhole in which medications, basic medications, can't be reached, in which electricity is rationed, in which inflation is in the thousands. Well, Maduro was warned. Trump moved the fleet. And then he sent in the teams to drag Maduro into a jail cell in New York. Now, Khamenei is currently hiding in a bunker. He's probably wondering if the next sound he hears is a bunker buster, you know, one of those bombs that goes right through and penetrates many, many miles beneath the floor, or whether it's a Navy SEAL at the door. The shadow war is over, and the direct confrontation era is here. And it strikes whilst Iran is at its lowest ebb since the 1970s. Now, we can't tell how widespread the movement to bring back the Shah of Iran, obviously his son now, actually is within Iran. We don't have the internet. We don't have public polling. We don't have anything like that. But what we do know is that people are out on the streets risking their lives when they do have an alternative, which is to stay home and do nothing and suffer. They're refusing to do that. And my friends, I would say to you that there can be no more brave an act than to risk your life for freedom itself. Can you? But my friends, it reminds me actually of whilst Trump is doing all of this, well, where is our government? Well, right now, Keir Starmer is in Beijing, kowtowing to the Chinese Communist Party, while our experts and the legacy media are already crying about international law and all these other things when it comes to Iran. So they'll bring on their specialists. I don't know, maybe Emily Maitlis will be on her podcast telling you that the regime, you know, we have no evidence. They're busy shooting their own citizens in the head. Don't listen to the frauds, you know, and all the rest of it. The managed decline of the West doesn't matter. They're the same people who told you that the way in which that we handled lockdowns was proportionate and we should have gone harder, faster, for longer. They told us that open borders was actually a strength and multiculturalism was a Britain strength because we are a nation built by migrants. Total falsity. They hate Donald J. Trump because he refuses to play their game. And I have to say, I personally stand with the people of Iran and I stand with the common sense of the American Armada. This, to me, is how a muscular conservatism actually shows itself. And meanwhile, Starmer is on bended knee, grovelling in Beijing, while surrendering our territory in the Indian Ocean, i.e. the Chagos Islands. It's a masterclass, is it not? Can you compare the strength and might of Trump's American machine with the complete servitude of Keir Starmer in China? Over recent days, we've seen reports of the phones being hacked of UK government officials in the recent past. Actual evidence of Chinese espionage at the highest levels of the United Kingdom state. So much so, by the way, that Starmer has gone out to China to beg President Xi for trade deals so we can have more cheap Chinese shite on our streets. I'm sorry to say that, but I've seen so many Chinese cars. I spot them everywhere I go, and it worries me. It sickens me, actually. It's the end of Western manufacturing, and if you think that's a good thing because you're getting a cheap bargain, oh, well, President Xi is laughing all the way to the bank so he can buy himself more weaponry to be able to put you in actual servitude. He's out there begging bowl for China, and you compare that with the principled stance in defense of the people of Iran. What about the Uyghur Muslims? You know, this is a government that tells us that they're going to spend millions on the protection of Muslims. What about the Muslims in Chinese concentration camps? Forced to work, slave away. Do they not matter? Well, actually, do you know what? He'll probably say any minute now, we should bring them all to Britain, wouldn't he? That's what he would say. But after the espionage, he allowed them to go ahead and build, is allowing them to go ahead and build their Chinese embassy, a mega embassy, one of the biggest the United Kingdom has ever seen, right next to vital communications networks that the United Kingdom has. The script is clear as day to me, and the prompts actually, I think, build up to a high-octane drama in which what I would call, actually, the Great British Kowtow. And I thought this was very, very instructive at Prime Minister's questions today, my friends. And I'm even going to highlight a Liberal Democrat. I don't bloody well do that often.
And whilst the Chinese regime continues to hunt down pro-democracy protesters on the streets of Britain with bounties on their heads, the British Prime Minister has gone cap in hand to China to ask for a trade deal on the promise of a super embassy from which the Chinese regime will continue to spy on us. The Chinese regime remains undeterred in its illegal actions against the UK and our citizens. So can I ask the Deputy Prime Minister to name one single consequence that the Chinese regime will face if they do not stop their campaign of espionage and repression?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, China matters, and ignoring them would be a dereliction of duty. We will build a consistent, long-term and strategic approach grounded in reality. I set that out in the China audit statement I made a few months ago. And that is what our allies do. President Trump, Macron, Chancellor Merz, Prime Minister Carney, all are visiting and engaging. We'll cooperate where we can, and I'm sure in areas like climate, she would expect us to cooperate, and we will challenge in areas where we disagree. That's the way that we deliver for the public of this country.
Daisy Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I note the Deputy Prime Minister could not name one single consequence if the Chinese do not stop their espionage and repression.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he says that we'll, of course, work with them on issues like climate. Are you having a giraffe? China burns more coal and is opening more coal mines than Sauron's Mordor from Lord of the Sodding Rings. The idea that they are an ally of Red Ed Miliband, other than the Marxist awful politics, on the climate change con. They know fine well when they're building, and one of our viewers this evening just posted a very good comment. Paul said BYD cars, BYD is a Chinese car manufacturer, are not allowed on Ministry of Defence sites. If you think that he's going to stop building these vehicles to sell into Western markets as they go down the force and the basically imposing the restrictions around what cars you can and can't sell, and Chinese manufacturers aren't going to grow fat on it so that they can enlarge the Chinese arsenal back home. Well, I mean, I literally do not know how to actually reason with you, because you're clearly an idiot. If you want to see the difference between a leader who stands up for his country and one who completely sells it out, then I beg you to find me a better example than that clip there. While Sakir is in Beijing, the first Prime Minister to visit in 8 years, he isn't there to show strength. He's there with 60 CEOs and a few mayors that nobody's ever heard of, begging for a trade deal, while the regime puts bounties on the heads of people on the streets of Britain. And he's asked, clear as day, is Whammy Lammy. While the CCP is actively hacking British infrastructure and you allow them to build a mega embassy and give them the Chagos Islands, what consequences will there be for China? Whammy Lammy couldn't name a single one. Apparently, being consistent and pragmatic is the new Labour word, my friends, for doormat. That's what we are under this government, a doormat for the illegal migrant, a doormat for the Chinese state, a doormat for every globalist interest that doesn't represent our own. But it gets worse, my friends, because while Starmer, he wishes he was a charmer, while Starmer is busy playing the pragmatist in Beijing, he's still handing over the keys to our national security in the sphere of the Indian Ocean. He's pushing ahead with that deal to surrender the sovereignty of the Chagos Islands to Mauritius. Now, as you all know, President Donald J. Trump has seen right through it. He's called it stupid. He's called it an act of total weakness. And he's right. How can he not be right? We're paying billions, some estimates say up to £35 billion over 99 years. You and I'll be long gone, just to lease back our base on Diego Garcia. It's a surrender treaty. It's a surrender treaty that opens the door for Chinese influence right next to a vital United States military hub. And Starmer claims that he's allaying concerns in Washington over this. But whilst he's got his nose in the trough over in Beijing, why on earth would the Americans, if they've got any common sense about them, which we know they have, believe him? The reality is that he didn't even have the guts to bring it up when he spoke to President Trump on Saturday gone. Right? Saturday gone. Didn't speak about it. The only reason that this deal hasn't been rubber stamped yet is because the actual opposition has been doing what the government won't do, standing up for the national interest of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Nigel Farage has been lobbying the American administration, the Trump administration, directly in an attempt to kill off this madness, right? Farage has been talking to the real decision makers in Washington. Don't forget, Vice President J.D. Vance was in the United Kingdom and met with the likes of Trump and other members of the reform upper echelons last year. in that beautiful part of our country, the Cotswolds, I believe it was. So they're talking to the real decision makers in Washington, while Starmer is ignored. Trump's bombshell post on Truth Social didn't happen by accident, my friends. It's the result of people putting Britain's interests first for a change. While the Labour Party walks a diplomatic tightrope, undoubtedly with Keir Starmer dressed as a clown as he does it, well, the Reform Party are building the alliance that actually matters when it comes to our interests and that of the Western world. We don't want fine words from Beijing. We want security for our nation. We want respect for our allies, and we want our enemies to know that we ain't, well, I was about to use strong words there. We ain't messing, shall we say. But there you have it, my friends. A prime minister in China asking for trade scraps so you can buy more crappy Chinese cars while giving away our territory. America, by the way, doesn't allow you to import these cars. Whatever's left of British manufacturing will be long dead. This is a government that thinks a super embassy for spies is a good trade deal for a photo op in Beijing. They tell us that we don't have to choose sides, but the rest of the world is having to pick theirs. Trump is choosing strength and national independence. China is choosing expansion and global dominance. And Starmer, well, he's choosing to stay in the departure lounge of globalist airlines. It's time for a government that doesn't just actually manage our decline, but actually fights for our future. I know a lot of you are getting involved in the comments there on this, what is, from Iran, the show of strength, the Chagos surrender, the Chinese capitulation. Starmer is the most rotten prime minister that I've seen in my lifetime. And I know, not to be impertinent, a lot of you are older than I am. In your lifetime too. Let me know in the comments. I'm sure you agree, though. I'm sure you agree. Now, let's actually walk away from China and let's go to Manchester, Greater Manchester, right? Forget the Westminster bubble, forget the Beijing beast. Let's look at the Gorton and Denton by-election. Let's read that headline there that I've got on your screen. The Greens, the Green Party, framed the by-election as a battle against anti-Muslim record of Reform's Matthew Goodwin. So as you know, Matt Goodwin is standing in the Gorton and Denton by-election. And I think this one article here sums up the front line of British politics. On one side, you've got Zach Polanski and that fella who stood up and when he won his council seat in Leeds, Mothin Ali, he said, Allahu Akbar. I mean, this is the balmy army of green graduates coming through, and they're desperately trying to fashion a new constituency. The Islamo-sympathetic leftist alliance. It's a fragile pact between middle-class idiots with luxury beliefs like net zero and a whole host of other things, and then these religious Islamic traditionalists, held together by one thing only, a very curious loathing of Israel. Polanski is still actually bowing to the post-truth cult that claims a woman can have a penis. I ask you, my friends, I don't think there are many Muslims in the area of Greater Manchester. This has a big Muslim population, this constituency. I don't think any of them would claim a woman can have a penis. It's not exactly conservative Muslim orthodoxy. This is a marriage of convenience that's destined for a really messy divorce. I mean, let's not forget, my friends, history tells us when it happened in Iran, the radical left got into bed with the Islamists. And, well, there's only one group left, and it ain't the radical left. You know what the Islamists did as soon as they got into power? Bye-bye. How naive. And on the other side, you've got Reform UK. The redoubtable Matt Goodwin, a man with actual beliefs and a perfectly fluent diction to express them. You know, a shock to the system for most politicians these days that cannot seem to get out the words unless it's on a Twitter account. The digital left are already digging up Matt Goodwin's comments. As Chloe Dobbs said on Reasoned UK earlier today, Labour have been reported to the police for selectively editing a video in which Matt bashes the Conservative Party conference in Manchester, and they've clipped it to suggest he was slagging off Manchester the place. He wasn't doing that. He was slagging off the dead, moribund party, formerly known as the Conservatives. Matt Goodwin is speaking for the people who've actually been defamed, smeared, racist, chippy little oiks for years. You know, the white working class in the north who are actually crying out for some semblance of cultural revival and economic security. Right? They want economic growth. They want border controls. They want to feel okay, to have a little bit of national pride. And Reform UK is a vehicle, a movement to give people like that, people like me, people like my family, people like you, a voice, while the Greens try to find common ground with the Gaza independence. I don't know how independent you are if Gaza is the thing that gets you out of bed on a morning. How about you get yourself over there? Let's be honest, right? And it's clear as day here. If you don't believe me, this is what's happening. This is the Muslim vote. It's a bloc which tells Muslim voters how they ought to be voting. And it says here, in Gorton and Denton, the strongest message to Starmer's Labour and beat reform is to vote Green, right? George Galloway might be standing there, his party, the Workers' Party, or whatever it's called, and that really nasty sectarianism that I saw in the Batley and Spen by-election, in which George Galloway stood, by the way, against the lesbian MP and sister of the murdered MP, Jo Cox, whose name currently escapes me, but someone's going to remind me in the comments. I remember watching that campaign and seeing the toxic way in which, well, one, I saw her sexuality being used to drum up votes against her. I saw the sectarian elements, the Batley Grammar School teacher, that story being suppressed. So the group, the Muslim vote, lining up behind the Greens, well, we're looking at a campaign built on Israelophobic canvassing, right? This to me is the new battleground in British politics, where religious sectarianism, as it did in Northern Ireland, starts to dictate how certain groups vote at the ballot box. And you've got a man in Birmingham called Shahid Butt, a man who was convicted of terror charges. He's running for council and telling the youth to learn to fight, right? So to me, if this is hope, right, and unity that the Green Party tell us about, while they ignore a rise of a really disgusting, divisive politics, well, this is luxury beliefs on one hand, like climate change, trans rights, and all these other things, and an actual barbarism versus civilization. I don't think there's anything civilized about convincing people that they need to learn to fight and using all this rhetoric of war in our own country. There is nothing good about the rise of this kind of politics. So you see the choice, my friends, right? You've got a prime minister in Beijing going cap in hand to a regime that spies on us. He's surrendering our strategic islands in the Indian Ocean. You've got a Green Party building a fragile alliance of these middle-class views and religious extremism. You've got the alternative being Matt Goodwin and Reform UK building a movement of genuine change, renewal and hope. And then you've got the strength of the Trump Armada in the Gulf and, as I say, the common sense of reform at home. We've got to start fighting for our future here. And I don't use fighting in the same way that they're using it before anyone says. Gordon and Denton, though, is a fight for the soul of our country. There is a real alignment going on in British politics, and the alternative is very, very nasty indeed. If you want to see how far the sectarian rot has travelled, well, my friends, look no further than this story. This was Bristol's Brunel Academy. By the way, the Green Party are doing very well in Bristol. They cancelled an event by the Jewish MP, Damien Egan, a Labour MP. And the NAU trade union and staff from the school threatened to protest. Some staff even said they were going to wear the keffiyeh, however you say it, you know, that tea towel, to school that day just to make that point against this Jewish MP. Why? Because he's a Jew. What does he have to do with Israel? You've got a problem with him being Jewish? Why don't they just, you know, if this was any other form of religious prejudice, it would be on the front page of every paper, with the MP receiving a morning media round and protection. So Ofsted went into the school, and after a quick look around, they claimed that there was no evidence of political bias, even though the whole teachers wanted a protest against this Jewish MP coming, and the school has a profound commitment to British values. I'm sorry, what? I don't think that when my grandfather was serving, that he thought British values were protesting like some middle-class twit at a school because a Jew was coming to visit school children from his own constituency. Since when is blocking a democratically elected MP because of his background or his, whatever it might be, is it his support for Israel? I don't know. When is that a British value? It's institutional cowardice at its finest and capitulation. Starmer's on bended knee to the Chinese. We as a country are on bended knee to a religious sectarianism running through British life. And it gets more chilling from this story because the inclusion and diversity coordinator, probably called, I don't know, Penelope, for the trust that runs this school. Oh, actually, I've got her name here. Saima Akhtar. Saima Akhtar, that's her name. She reportedly described the Hamas terrorists, this is from the article, of October 7th as heroes fighting for justice. Heroes. Heroes. I've seen the vehicles in which little girls hiding at a music festival were shot to pieces and then set on fire by an RPG rocket. Heroes. 1,200 people, women, children, subjected to murder, violence, and other unspeakable truths. And they actually want to suggest that the Jewish MP is the problem. She was telling people to ignore media attempts to paint Israel as a victim. And by the way, I don't speak up for Labour MPs very often, but, you know, I think this is wrong. I think this is wrong. The irony for me would be funny if it wasn't so damn dangerous. You know, Ofsted talk about a harmonious and religiously tolerant atmosphere. Did you miss the sodden memo, Ofsted, on the fact a Jewish MP was turned away and told he would be protested against by people in face coverings covering themselves in tea towels because of the fact he's a Jew? Did you miss the senior official in the trust allegedly cheering for those who want to wipe the Jews in the Middle East off the map? The system isn't just broken, it's utterly captured. That's why events like this by-election matter. The trade unions don't hide it. The NEU, one of their chiefs, posted saying that we are not here to play. They previously blocked an Israeli-owned cyber security company from a conference. It is, as I say, the new sectarianism. It's a pincer movement between radicalized staff, activist trade unions, a diversity industry that has completely lost the plot, and we are squeezed in the middle. Reform are fighting for the common sense to break that apart. These groups are indoctrinating the next generation in areas like the West Country. So if we don't stand up and actually clear out the rot, the institutional rot, then we won't have a nation actually left to recognise, if you even, that is, do anymore. I'm sure a lot of you struggle to do so right now. And Jew says, Jew Palin says, so Darren, what do we do about it? We've got to all go out there and campaign. We've got to. One thing that frustrates me, I'll tell you this right now. Sometimes in certain parts of the country, there aren't enough people putting them forward as candidates, putting themselves forward as candidates. How do you expect to bring about change if your response is, oh, well, someone else will do it? If not you, who? If not you, why them? If not you, how do we win? Either stand, either campaign, either knock on doors, either pick up the phone for the party, certainly join the party. Speak to your friends and family. Tell them how important this is, that it's Britain's last chance. Go to Reform UK events, support them with your hard-earned cash. Go to places like Greater Manchester and help hand out a few leaflets. If we don't take those small actions that inconvenience you for a day or two, maybe, I don't know, a couple of times a month, then how on earth do we expect to bring about change? That's what frustrates me. That's why I did what I did, because actually I do recognise that the country that my beautiful little niece is going to grow up in is radically different from the experience that I will have had as a child. And I'm 32. That's not that long a period of time. And it's changed rapidly over that time. So what's it going to look like by the time that that beautiful little girl is an adult herself? You know, I struggle with that. I really do. So please, if you can, get involved. We need you. Your country needs you. It's not about Nigel Farage. It's not about me. It's about getting, as Karen says, it's about getting involved as much as you can. She says, I do it as a member. Sadly, can't get about knocking on doors, though. Karen, honestly, I'm sure we're going to set up a phone banking situation soon where you can actually make calls for the party. You know, it's going to be all out war, this campaign. But you get my point. The Gorton and Denton by-election is a sign of where Britain is at. This is the new politics. This is the new reality we're in. The Conservative Party is a moribund husk. Forget about it. Vote for them, and you're voting to allow nutters like the Greens to actually get in. And by the way, I saw, speaking of the Green Party, I saw that the gay rights campaigner Peter Tatchell tweeted. He said, I'll actually read it out to you. He said, Green leader Zach Polanski parties with supporters in a London gay bar, Heaven, where he once worked. He's the openly gay party leader and has a long history of LGBT plus advocacy. Zach promises to ban conversion practices, protect trans rights and more. Bravo. So he's an openly gay man that believes that actually standing up for gay children who are being medicalised and experimented on in the name of gender affirmation are transphobic. Go figure. But he also actually says that, the Green Party needs to stand up and support the 4 million Muslim voters in this country. Well, and not all of them. I'm not saying all of them for a second. I'm really not. But I'm talking the ones that are saying things like this, the message is to beat reform is to vote green from a bloc called the Muslim Vote. Those sorts of groups will not agree with Zach Polanski's views on gays. They won't be going with him to gay nightclubs. They won't be going with him to trans parades. So I couldn't give a shit what Zach Polanski's sexuality is. It's about as interesting to me as that mile-long gap in his 2 front teeth. I couldn't give a flying flamingo. You stupid, naive idiot. Wake up. You care about gay rights, Peter Tatchell. How about you wake up to the fact that there is a new, powerful block of voters coming through with very different priorities to you and on the so-called left of politics that the political parties pander to. Wake up. Now, I want to do a plank of the week this week because, and I had to do this, I saw on my social media feed that Sir Nick Clegg has crawled out from it. That was after, by the way, I noticed Priti Patel had unfollowed me. R.I.P. Prits, R.I.P. Sir Nick Clegg has crawled out from his multi-million-dollar Palo Alto bunker in Silicon Valley to tell us that Nigel Farage is the author of a lost decade, despite the fact he's never been in power. And I said, excuse me, Nick Clegg, are you describing your own time as Deputy Prime Minister? Have a listen to this drivel.
There's nothing wrong with saying, look, we thought this was going to turn out differently. The people who advocated have clearly failed, and they had their chance. They had hardline Brexiteers in power. Liz Truss, Boris Johnson. When I hear Nigel Farage, who, by the way, gets away scot-free, I mean, his great achievement in life is a disaster for this country, and no one holds him to account.
In what way should he be held to account, Sir Nick?
Because he's the author of this lost decade, and he's sort of preening himself as if he might be the next Prime Minister. And the problem is the other parties don't want to take him on because they don't want to talk about Brexit. In the end, countries, like individuals or families, you can't keep living a lie.
This is the man, my friends, saying that there's a lost decade because of Nigel Farage, a man that campaigned for Brexit. Yes, he's done it since I was put on this planet in 1993. He wasn't in power. He didn't get to deliver Brexit. He put the faith and trust in Boris Johnson. We have not had a vehemently pro-nation Prime Minister such as Nigel Farage in number 10. Nick Clegg is a man who railed against nuclear power plants. That would have been very handy right now as you look outside at the storms, shivering your tits off. Can I use that word? Is that offensive? I don't know. Shivering, you've got icicles hanging from your nips. Would have been handy right now, wouldn't it, to have cheap and abundant energy, electricity. Instead, you've got the highest electricity costs in the world. You've got industry closing down like you wouldn't believe, saying we can't do it. We can't afford it. You're just going to have to buy your Chinese cars. And China saying, goody, goody. Muggy Starmer, We can make a bob or two out of those Brits. As they closed down their own industries, it was Nick Clegg who, in government, stood against nuclear energy. If he hadn't done that, by now, by 2026, we would have had nuclear power plants online. He didn't do that. He stood against it and instead stood for wind and solar. Look where the hell that's got us. Since 2008, the Climate Change Act, signed by Ed Miliband, emboldened by the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives, and now laden in thick, gloopy goo by Ed Miliband back in charge in that department. It is an act of lunacy. So how dare you turn around and say Nigel Farage is the problem of a lost decade? It was his lefty liberal politics that have weakened the nation state and actually handed the tools to our enemies. This is a man who speaks about speaking truth to power, like Nigel Farage, who looked students in the eye, promised them no tuition fees if they vote for them, and then lumped them with truckloads of debt for degrees that aren't actually worth the paper they're written on. The debt interest goes up and up and up. Many, many, many students never ever going to pay back even half of their debt. And they are working shifts in retail after their degrees. They could have gone straight into work, no debt, made themselves a decent living, but Nick sold them a lie and now continues to perpetuate that lie. I will take the so-called lies of Nigel Farage any day over this fork-tongued Liberal Democrat. We don't call them the Fib Dems of Durham for no reason. I can tell you that for free. So tonight, my friends, there's my plank of the week. But tonight, my friends, I think, do you not, that the choice, as I keep saying, is crystal clear. We've got the Prime Minister in Beijing, cap in hand, to a regime that spies on us, surrendering our islands in the Indian Ocean and asking President Xi for a trade deal to sell us more Chinese goods. We've got a school system that allows activists to block MPs while inclusion officers cheer for terror, and the inspectors say, there's nothing here to see here, my lord. And then you've got the alternative, the strength of the nation state through Trump's ARMADA in the Gulf, and the common sense of Reform UK at home. And they tell us we don't have to choose sides, but the rest of the world has picked theirs. Trump is choosing strength. China is choosing that global expansion and dominance. Starmer is choosing to stay, as I said, in that departure lounge of globalism. We need to fight for a government that fights for our future, for us, for your children, for your grandchildren, for your country, for your community. Proud Englishman says, geez, Clegg's paper round has aged him terribly. I agree, looks rough as a badger's bum. Paul says, yeah, Nick Clegg who lied about tuition fees, absolutely. How dare he call Nigel Farage a liar? Jew says, God, Nick Leggings. I'd forgotten all about him, Leggings. Karen says, Mike's plank. Yes, not quite, but I didn't know what else to call him. I couldn't do a Dan Mutton Union jackass, could I? Plank, what I could call him worse if you want me to, Karen. I could call him the W word. Paul says, I've worked on the building sites for 20 years and we used to talk about the sport, women and drinking. Now it's about the state of the UK and getting Labour out. It's radicalised people, Paul. It has. Radicalised people. Grumpy, my good friend Grumpy. It's important people do what they can. Every little bit helps. It absolutely does, Grumpy. And thank you for everything you do. And Nora says, it worked in Iran. Now they are here. The left are being idiots. The left are being idiots, idiots, idiots. Grumpy again. The nation is in big trouble. We need reform. It's our very last chance, and most people are realising that. Isa Gaiman says reform. D says reform. Ash says, Darren, my dad is nearly 70 and has never seen a prime minister as bad as this. Ash, your dad is a wise man and clearly not a blind or deaf man either. Because it's obvious to, I think, most of us, do you not? Heel says, who wants to vote for a party led by a tit whisperer? Yes, well, I'm hoping he can hypnotise me if he gets into power, hypnotise me into a sleep from which I never wake. Maybe they'll just put me under. They've legalised euthanasia now, haven't they? Maybe they'll just put me under. Goodness gracious me. Lisa says, good evening. Good evening, Lisa. Yeah, Whammy Lammy's getting it from you guys in the comments as well. Whammy Lammy. You know, he called Lee Anderson thick at Prime Minister's questions today. He said Lee Anderson is a low IQ MP. This is the man who said that Henry VII came after Henry VIII on national telly. He went to Cambridge. If Lee Anderson's thick, I dread to think what that bloody chubby oik getting himself jetting around the world on the taxpayer's expense. Jeff says he's done a deal for 50 more Chinese chippies. Oh, you've made me laugh. Mr. 8 says, if Trump makes a deal with the Iranian Republic, where does that leave the Iranian people? That's a good question, you know, but actually I think ultimately, I think this is Trump leveraging his... Trump holds all the cards right now. I think this is Trump leveraging what he does actually have, the strength he does have to seize the moment, and it could come good for the Iranian people. I hope and pray it does. They deserve our hopes and our prayers. They are very, very brave people. Very brave people. Grumpy says, we never got the Brexit we wanted because it was never executed properly. They never wanted it. It didn't stand a chance under the Uniparty. I agree. I totally agree with you. Open says, teachers need license to check for extreme ideology. Hey, teacher, leave those kids alone. Open Root maybe didn't sing it, but I've done it anyway. Right, my friends. Okay, Jennifer says, Lammy went to Harvard. Wow, God, it just goes to show Whammy Lammy. Whammy Lammy went to Harvard. Is that a DEI? I'll be called racist for saying that, won't I? Me and my big mouth. Right, my friends, I'm going to wish you a very good night. Thank you very much for your company. We'll see what happens overnight, eh? Because it could get very, very frisky indeed. And no, I'm not talking about my love life. I am, of course, talking about the oceans just outside, surrounding Iran and the Middle East. And we'll see exactly what is going on in that. It's the Indian Ocean, isn't it? We'll see what happens overnight. Right. God bless you. Like this video if you haven't already. Please do subscribe. Chloe Dobbs is posting more than me. She is a legend. And I will see you when I see you, which is probably going to be next week. Same time. I'm making a habit of this. Making a habit of it. All right. Love you lots. By the way, if you're on Substack, join our Substack community because Grumpy Grandad has been posting updates, news updates. He is like the best algorithm you could possibly need. He is as sound as a pound. Sound as a pound. So join our Substack community, darrengrimes.com, if you haven't already, and I'll chat with some of you in there alongside the legend that is GG, Grumpy Grandad. All right, good night, folks. God bless. Keep up the hope. Don't lose faith. I beg you. We need you. We need you, need you, need you.